So let's talk a little bit about sensitivity analysis and what that really means. So with sensitivity analysis, this is simply just changes in the variables within our cost volume profit model. The assumptions are still the same, right? That all these prices and costs and everything are going to remain constant. What changes is the variable. Do we increase the selling price per unit? Do we increase the tax rate, decrease the tax rate? Okay. We do this basically just to show, how sensitive are the relationships in the CVP model? How sensitive are they to the changes? So this table below is going to be pretty important. I would print this out or ask me, and I can send you a copy of it to print out, but this shows how a change in each variable of our CVP model changes the relationships. So how does the contribution margin change if you decrease the variable cost per unit? How does the break-even point change? How does that impact our units needed for a desired change in profit? Okay. So let's just go through really quickly and talk about each of these. So if we have a change in selling price, when the selling price changes, we have a change in both the contribution margin and the break-even point. So let's say now that we need to sell hamburgers for $2.50 instead of $3 a piece to be competitive. For some reason, a competitor has opened up a stall right down the corridor from us, and now we've got to sell for $2.50 instead of $3 just so that we still are competitive. So our previous contribution margin was going to be $1.90, that $3 selling price less the $1.10 variable cost. If we change our selling price to $2.50, if we decrease it, now our contribution margin is only $1.40. This means we only have $1.40 that is available to be contributed to the fixed costs. So previously, doing our break-even calculation for units, we saw that we would need to sell 370 units of, I keep saying units, but we need to sell 370 hamburgers, right, to break even, to make $0 and to lose $0. If we have to change the price of this hamburger, if we have to decrease the selling price to $2.50, we're now going to have to sell 503 hamburgers to break even instead of just the 370. So if instead we increase the selling price, just make a note that the opposite is true, right? So if instead we raise this to $3.50 per hamburger, our contribution rises as well. Our contribution margin, it would be $2.40. So just know that depending on if the change is an increase or a decrease, it'll have a different impact on the relationships. So now let's look at this and say we've got a change in variable cost, right? So the changes in the variable cost also change both the contribution margin and the break-even point, right? We calculate our contribution margin by the selling price less the variable cost. So if we change the variable cost, it's obvious that there's going to be a change in our contribution margin. We calculate our break-even point by taking the net of our fixed costs less our profit and dividing that by our contribution margin. Since our contribution margin was affected by our variable costs, it stands to reason that our break-even point will be impacted by that as well. So let's say that the variable cost for hamburgers can be reduced by 5 cents per unit. That's a good thing, right? So previously we were looking at a $1.90 contribution margin. Now we would be looking at a $1.95 contribution margin, meaning there is more available after variable costs to put towards our fixed costs. Okay, so that's a good thing. What that'll end up doing is it will end up reducing our break-even point, meaning instead of 370 hamburgers that we had to sell to break even, now if we can reduce our variable cost by 5 cents, we only need to sell 361 hamburgers to break even. Okay. Again, just make a note that if the opposite were true, that if instead we increased the variable cost, it would have the opposite effect of what we just discussed. The next thing to talk about is a change in fixed cost. So a change in the fixed cost changes your break-even point, but it does not have any impact on your contribution margin. And that is simply because we don't consider fixed costs inside of our contribution margin calculation. Contribution margin tells us how much of our sale price is contributing or available to contribute to the payment of fixed costs. So if we change the fixed cost, it does not impact our contribution margin. And we can see that as we walk through this next problem. So let's say that now the university is going to charge us $750 per game as a concession fee instead of $700 per game. This brings our total new fixed cost to $753. So previously we needed to sell 370 hamburgers to break even. If they raise that cost to us, our fixed cost by $50, we would now need 397 hamburgers to break even. So we can see here that even just a little bit of change in one of the variables inside of the model can have a pretty drastic impact. Okay, so just take a note again that if the fixed costs are decreased, then the opposite is going to happen, right? So if we decrease fixed costs, it's going to decrease the number of units that we have to sell to break even. Change in tax rate. So the change in tax rate only impacts the numbers of units needed to reach target profit. Okay. The reason this is true is because the tax rates only apply to any dollars after we've met break even. So it applies to that first penny after we hit our break even point, and anything after that. Okay, so what we're looking for is our after, right after we've hit our target profit. So let's say that we've increased our tax rate by 5% to 20%. So it was 15%, now it's going to be 20%. So when it was just 15%, we needed to sell 463 units to hit our $150 target profit, right? That was profit. So you had the 150 divided by 0.85, and that's going to give you what you really need, right? That's what you really need to make $150. And then we divide that by our contribution margin to get our units needed, basically find our break-even point. Again, we're just simply adding something to this formula. We already know our break-even formula. Now we're just adding in, oh yeah, we've got this additional cost. So if we increased it by 5%, that would jump our units needed to 469 hamburgers sold to get to that $150 target profit. So not a drastic change. It's like changing the fixed cost and the variable cost. But remember, those fixed costs, those variable costs, they also apply to every unit even before the break-even point. So, all right, so I'll end this video here actually, and we will, I'll post the next video and we'll start going over non-product and product costs.